Welcome everybody to TechCraft, this is Rob, and in today's video we're going to talk all about watermarking your images using iOS shortcuts. Let's go. So thanks so much to everybody who's been commenting on this series and following this series so far. Your feedback is really useful. It seems like quite a few of you are interested in topics related to image manipulation and PDF manipulation. So the next few videos in this series will focus on that. For today, though, we're going to focus on image watermarking, using images as the watermark and using text as the watermark. But also we'll start to dig a little bit into how you can debug shortcuts, how you can structure them in smarter ways, how you can make reusable shortcuts that you can then put together into bigger, larger shortcuts, and really just start to up our game on how we make iOS shortcuts. But let's dive straight in and start with the first image watermarking shortcut, which is to overlay one image on another. So here I am in shortcuts with a blank shortcut, and we're going to construct our watermarking shortcut. And what I want to do is make it work so that this will either be triggered as a widget, and in which case you'll be prompted to select the photograph that you want to watermark, or it runs in the share sheet, in which case it will watermark the image that's passed in from the sharing application. So to just make that work, we're going to select show in share sheet, and we will choose the images as the share sheet type. Okay, cool. Give this a name. We're going to call it WMI for watermark image. And that's the basic setup. Now, what I want to do here is use a dummy photograph to watermark while I'm testing this. This is quite a nice pattern that I like to follow. If I'm going to run this action 10, 15, 20 times while I'm building it, I don't want to have to select a photograph every time. So it can be quite handy to have a dummy input. For that, I'm going to use the find photos action. Just going to drag that into here. Now I'm just going to filter this out so it chooses only photos from this Shortcut Sundays album, and I only want one, so I'm going to set the limit to 1. If you're using this pattern, it makes a lot of sense to set the thing you're operating on, to set the input into a variable, so that later on when you come back and remove your dummy input, you don't have to change the rest of your shortcut. So I'm going to grab a set variable action and bring that in. I'm going to call this the image, which is cool. So set the image to the result of this filter, which will just be one photograph. And it makes sense just to quickly run that and see what happens. So there's the image. You can either press play to run these shortcuts, or you can press Command and R and it will run the shortcut. So there we go. That's what we started with. Next thing is to get hold of the actual image that's going to be the watermark, that's going to be overlaid on top of our photograph. For this, I'm going to use a photograph that's stored in iCloud. You can store it in Dropbox if you want, or you can even prompt for another photograph. But I want to put the same watermark on each time, so I'm going to store it in iCloud and then retrieve it when the shortcut runs. Just quickly show you in files what this looks like. I'm in my iCloud drive here. I'm in the shortcuts folder, and I have the watermark here. If I long press on this and choose info, you can see the name here. Pay attention to the casing here. It's important that watermark is in lowercase and that PNG is in uppercase. You must type that in exactly. It won't work if you change the case. Okay, so we'll go back to shortcuts, and then to get hold of that file from iCloud, we'll use the get file action. I'm going to drag that in here like that. Yes, we want the service to be iCloud. No, we don't want to show the document picker because we know that we want watermark.png, and again, just get the casing right. And I like to leave error if not found showing. This way, if there is a situation where the watermark file moves, then I'll be told explicitly and I don't have to worry why my shortcut has gone wrong for some spurious reason. Okay, I'm also going to set this as a variable. Drag set variable in there. I'm going to call that mark image. Another little hint at this point is if you want to check that you've got the right image, then what you can do is use the quick look action just to see that you've got the right thing. So let me show you that. I'm just going to do a quick look. I'm going to drag that in, and I can drag it in here in between the set variable and the get file, and it will just almost let me look at what's happening in between these two actions. So if I run this now, it pops up my watermark image. There is actually something here in the white, so don't worry about that. Okay, cool. I'm going to take that out because I don't want that to happen later on. Now what I want to do is put this watermark image on top of this photograph. So I'm going to use the overlay image action for that. Drag that down here. And So what goes on top is the mark image, and what goes on the bottom, what's the background, is the actual image from the beginning. Okay, perfect. Let's just press run and see what happens. Okay, so this is looking good. We have an image, which is the photograph. We have the watermark on top of it. It's popped up in this image editor, which you might like because you can move the watermark around. But I want the watermark to be down here in the bottom, and I want it to be smaller. So I'm going to make that happen right now. First thing is I don't want that image editor to pop up, so I'm going to deselect that. I want it to be in the bottom right. Okay, that's cool. So let's see what that happens there. Okay, it's looking better. I've got the image, I've got it, the watermark in the bottom right, but it's still quite large. I really want the watermark to be sized as a percentage of the image that's being marked. I really want the width of my watermark to be, in this case, let's say 12.5% of the overall width of the photograph it's being put on top of. And we can do that quite easily. So notice here we have a width option. This is the width of the mark image that's going to go on top. So we want to set that to 12.5% of the width of the overall, the main photograph. To do that, we're going to calculate this. So we're going to use a calculate action. I'm going to put this in here. I'm going to set this to be mark width. So the mark width is the result of this calculation. Ignore this for a second. And then in here, we want the width to be that. So all we need to do now is make sure that we get this number right. So what I want to do is get the width of the overall image. So I can do that by clicking image in variables here, and then clicking on it again here and choosing width as an attribute. I really like this ability to pass in a variable and then dive deep into some of the attributes of it. This is really quite handy. To make this 12.5%, I'm just going to multiply the width by 0.125. Oops, that's a little bit too much. 0.215, and that looks right to me, so let's press play and see what happens. Okay, cool, there we go. We have the watermarked image, and if you press these little arrows here, it pops out and you can see it in a bit more detail. So that is the watermark on top of our photograph. All that remains now is to go back to the top and make it work so that we can select the photograph or have it passed in from the share sheet. So let's do that. So back up here now, and I'm going to delete this filter, and we're just going to leave that not working for a second. When I have a shortcut where I'm either going to take the shortcut input or I'm going to prompt for some input if the shortcut input is empty, I like to start by setting my main kind of input variable to be the shortcut input. So we'll take this photos out of here and clear that and set that to be the shortcut input. Okay, cool. Right, next thing is I want to check if there is no shortcut input, and if not, I'm going to then prompt the user to select a photograph from their album. So I'm going to take an if action here, drag that in. I'm going to say if the image, which is this variable here, does not have any value, then in this block here, we will prompt for a photograph, and in this block, we'll do nothing. So I'm just going to put nothing in there. You don't have to add the nothing action in there. I just find it handy because it's kind of stating the intention that you really mean to do nothing, and it's not just a mistake. So what I want to do now is select photos, drag that into here. I'm going to expand that and allow that to be just one. We'll see how select multiple works later on, but I just want one for now. And must remember not to forget to set the variable in here. And it's called the image. And it can be quite handy sometimes to put another quick look action in just after you've set the variable if you want to check that your variable is set correctly, but we know that it is here, so we're fine. Let's press play. And now we're prompted for the photograph that we want to watermark. So I'm going to come down here and choose this photograph of Frankfurt. And there we go. We've got a watermarked photograph. We need to be able to actually save the photograph to an album somewhere. Right now, it's just showing it in the Shortcuts app. To do that, I'm not going to change this shortcut. I'm not going to add another action to this shortcut. What I want to do is build another shortcut that will use the actions from here, but will also tack on a save action as well. Let's see how that works. So I'm going to leave that WMI shortcut there, and I'm going to create a new shortcut, and I'm going to call this one Watermark Single Image. Okay, and set the exact same input types. Go in the widget, go in the share sheet, deselect all of those, and then choose images. Okay, perfect. Click done. And the first thing I'm going to do is call run shortcut. And what this is going to do is going to allow me to immediately pass my input through to our WMI shortcut. So I've set the shortcut input to be the input here, and I'll get the results back. So let's see how that works. If I press play, it's popped up all the details from the previous shortcut. I'm able to run it again. And yes, I get my watermarked Frankfurt image. This is kind of useless at this point, but now we can do something else. We can do something more with this image, and let's save it to an album. So I'm going to choose save photo to album. And I'm just going to save that to recent. And what I'm also going to do is deselect this here, show while running, so we don't have to see all of the painful details of that. And then press play. Okay, choose my photo again. There we go, it's shown there. But if I switch over to photographs, come into here, in recents, you can now see that I have my watermarked Frankfurt image. This is really nice. Now, if you're only using this to do this one shortcut action, it doesn't make sense to break them apart. But what if we wanted to now create some kind of bulk watermarker? Well, we can use our first watermarking shortcut, but call it multiple times for multiple photographs and save those photographs in a specific place. Let's see how. So here I am back in the Shortcuts app, and I'm going to create a new shortcut, and I'm going to call this one Bulk WM. And this I just want to be in the widget. So click done. And the first thing I want to do in here is prompt the user to select multiple photos. So we'll use that select multiple that we saw earlier in the select photos action. Okay, and let's just run that to see how that works. So I'm going to choose these two images here, press done. And what we get back is a list, and you can see this list because it's got the dots down here, and I can switch between the two of these with a swipe if I want. Okay, really cool. Now what I want to do is loop over every photograph in this list and call our very first watermark shortcut that accepts an image as input, returns the watermarked image as output, and then we can save those watermarked images to a specific place. Okay, cool. So we'll start with the repeat action. This is the shortcuts version of a programming loop if you're a coder. And it will repeat with each item in this list of photos. And then all we're going to do is call our WMI shortcut from earlier. So choose WMI. The input this time is not the shortcut input, it's the item in each iteration of the list, and that's this special variable repeat item. This variable changes each time we go through the list, or each iteration of the list has a new value from the list. And I don't want show while running, otherwise if you're watermarking like 100 images, it just keeps popping up, popping up, popping up. So we'll get rid of that. And let's press play and see what happens. So I'm going to scroll down again, choose my two images, press done. And there we go. We've got two watermarked images this time, both of them with the little watermark in the corner. Now all that remains is to save these images to the Photos app. So I'm going to choose Save Photos, Save to Photo Album. Okay, and now I want to select a particular album. I've got a watermarked album here that I use. And if I press play now and choose again my two photographs, you will see them pop up at the bottom here. And if I switch to photos, go into my watermarked album, there they are. This is really powerful. I've got one reusable shortcut that will allow me to build either a single image watermarker or a bulk image watermarker. And I could reuse that as part of larger workflows. Maybe I want to crop an image first, or I don't know, grab an image from a particular external source, then crop it and then overlay it and then watermark it. I can start to build up these complex flows, not in a shortcut that has 400 actions, but in smaller independent shortcuts that I compose together into a sensible workflow. Now, there is a slight annoyance here. If I go to my homepage and show you my list of widgets, every shortcut, even the ones that we don't intend to be used, like this WMI one, will appear either in the share sheet or in the widget at the side. There's no way currently in shortcuts to mark one of your shortcuts. There's kind of like a library function as a library shortcut and say, I'm not intending to really use this directly. It's really just part of my overall flow. I'd really like to see that in a future version of shortcuts, that it'd be nice if there was a better way to build these library functions, these library shortcuts. So that's watermarking one image with another. Let's now take a look at something a little bit more complicated, which is watermarking an image with some custom text. So here we are back in the Shortcuts app, and I've already put together the very basic skeleton of this shortcut, just with things we've seen so far. So this is a shortcut that will be in the widget. It's finding a dummy photograph to watermark, and it's setting that into a variable called the image. Now we have to create the text watermark and overlay it. And it's creating the text watermark that proves to be quite complex. There's no built-in set of actions to create an image from text. We have to do that ourselves. There are a couple of techniques for this, and I'm showing you what I think is the most flexible and certainly my favorite. If you look at this one and decide you don't like it, then throw a comment below and I'll happily put another video together on some other ways of doing this. But let's dive straight in and see how I've solved this problem. First thing is you need to install the Run JavaScript app. This is a really cool app. I'm just showing the homepage here that allows you to run some JavaScript code kind of in a Safari context. So you've got a full web page document object model available, but run it using this X callback URL scheme. And this is something that integrates really nicely into Shortcuts. So I'm able to create some JavaScript code. I can then call that code from within Shortcuts. That code can do basically anything that you can do on a web page, and then you can pass the result back. What this means is that we can use the JavaScript canvas to create an image and pass that image back, and that image will be the text of our watermark. Let's see how this works. So the first thing I want to do is actually ask the user what they want the watermark text to be, and I'm going to use the ask for input action for that and drag that on here, and we'll just say like, what is the watermark? And just to see how that works, this is what happens when you run it, and we'll say Rob Harrop. I can spell my own name. And then you get that back as a text object. So now that we've got the watermark text, we actually have to call the JavaScript code, passing in that text, and then we'll get back an image. We will take a look at the JavaScript code at the end, but let's just see the shortcut mechanics first. Now, the way this works is we're going to call into Run JavaScript using what's called an X callback URL. So we're going to basically create a URL that will open up, that will actually run the Run JavaScript app. And in that URL, we're going to pass in the JavaScript we want and the text input, and it will do its business and then return to us the image. Let's see how we're going to do that. So first things first, I need to get hold of the JavaScript content, and this is stored in a file in my iCloud. So using the get file from before, deselect the document picker. It's called rjs image.js, and let's just press R. See what happens. So now I've got the JavaScript as a text object as well. So now that we've got the JavaScript file content and we've got the contents of the text we want to encode, we can create the URL, that X callback URL, and call into the Run JavaScript app. For that, I'm going to use the URL action. And the basic template is this. So Run JavaScript is the URL scheme for the Run JavaScript app. It's an X callback URL. We want to run something, and we're going to pass in the script and the input. So the script is going to be this, and the input is going to be this. And we need to encode both of these things because we can't just pass them in as they are. So to encode the JavaScript and to encode the input text, I'm going to use the URL encode actions. And I'm going to set both of those things into some variables that I can use later on. So I'll take a URL encode action. I'm going to put it just here after we've prompted for the watermark. And I'm going to set that variable to be WM text. And then I'm going to get another URL encode, which is there. And I'm going to set that variable to be WM script. And then in my URL scheme here, I'm just going to insert those. So the script, I want to be WM script, and the input, I want to be WM text. And then to open this URL, we're going to use the open X callback URL action, which is built into Shortcuts. And let's run this now and see what happens. So my watermark is going to be Rob Harrop. And then what we get back is a load of gibberish. And this is base 64 encoded image data. Because we can't pass binary data backwards and forwards between Shortcuts and the Run JavaScript extension, we have to encode the image data in some way. And base 64 is a very convenient way of doing it. And it just so happens that you can encode and decode base 64 data very easily inside Shortcuts. So I'll take a base 64 encode action from here, and I'm going to select decode instead. And then what I want to do is just set a variable with the mark image. And let's just see what happens when we run this. There we go. We've got an image with our text in it. Now, let's just take a few seconds to just recap what we did here, because it's quite a complicated action. So if I scroll back to the top, the first thing is we've got a dummy photograph that we're going to watermark. Can kind of ignore that for the second. Then we prompt for the watermark text, and we're going to URL encode that provided input. Very important that URL encode this. Typically, a watermark text will have some spaces in it, and it's the spaces that cause havoc in particular if you don't encode the URL. So don't miss that action out. Then we put that in our variable WM text. Then we load our JavaScript. We use that JavaScript, again URL encoded, as input to our X callback URL. The script is the JavaScript, the input is the text, and then we run that X callback URL using the inbuilt functions in Shortcuts. The result from that is base64 encoded image data. We then decode that using the scripting functions, and we have an image. Now all that remains is to overlay that image in exactly the same way that we saw before. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that really quickly. Okay, so there we have it. If I press play now, you will see that I can type in my watermark. I'm going to put Rob Harrop 2019. Run that, and there's the image. And if I zoom in, you'll see it's got the watermark over it at the bottom there, which is really nice. And because we're using JavaScript, the text image that comes back is the exact right size to be overlaid like this. I'll show you that JavaScript code in a second. It's kind of frustrating that there is no way that you can create these text overlays in Shortcuts, and I would love to see that become something that happens in the future. But for now, at least, with Run JavaScript, you've got this really powerful functionality. Let's take a quick look now at the JavaScript. So here I am in Codex, which is my coding app that I use for JavaScript. And you can see it's not a lot of code. It's only 19 lines, and it's really quite simple. So the first thing is we have access to this run.js object. And from that, we can get the input as text. So that's just the copyright text that's passed in our X callback URL. Then I create a JavaScript canvas, and I'm setting the font to be 300 pixels Verdana, but you can change the font here if you want. The critical thing here is that I'm then measuring this text to find out how wide it is and how it ascends from the baseline and how it descends from the baseline. And then I use that to create a brand new canvas that's exactly the right size to take that text with a small margin. The reason why I do this is I want to be able to position the image exactly in the bottom corner, on either side, or in the top corner, or in the center, without it having extra bits on the side, or even without the text being chopped off. So just creating that extra canvas that's the right size allows you to position the text perfectly. And then it's a simple case of just like writing the text in there. And the trick at the end, though, is just to use this. I can get a data URL, which is basically an image URL where the image data isn't pointing to a file on a server somewhere. It's actually base64 encoded data. And I just pull the base64 data off the end and return that to Shortcuts. And because we can decode that in Shortcuts, we have an image pass between the two. It's a little bit janky, but it does work. And what I like about this is that I have the full power of JavaScript Canvas here. So if you're a JavaScript coder, or you fancy turning your hand at that, this is a really interesting way of playing around with image overlays in iOS Shortcuts. So I hope you can see just how powerful the iOS Shortcuts image manipulation is, especially if you pair it with something like Run JavaScript, where you have access to a full image canvas. We only touched very briefly on how Run JavaScript works, and certainly only touched very briefly on how X callback URL works. If you're interested in seeing more of the mechanics there, then throw a comment below and I'll happily put together some videos on that. It really does help you unlock the power of automation if you understand exactly how X callback works. I'll put all the code for the image manipulation up on my GitHub, and the links will be below, and all the shortcuts will be up on iCloud as well for you to download if you want. I really hope you found this video useful, and I hope that you found it entertaining. Please do hit like, do hit subscribe, and don't just hit subscribe, but hit the bell as well. so that you don't miss out on any future videos. There is a shortcuts video coming every Sunday for the foreseeable future, at least, until I run out of ideas. So therefore, please comment and please keep those ideas coming. Other than that, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.